Hello, everyone. Well, we still have a few people joining in, but then in the meanwhile, I would just warm up and begin with the discussions. So, well, today we intend to speak and discuss a little about strategic performance management. So, in next 45 minutes to an hour, the duration that we're going to spend together, let us just try and explore how amazing this area of uh, influence that can help us leverage on helping organizations truly flourish. So, well, trying to warm up, and as I try and begin with the discussion, let me just begin the whole idea by giving you a quick brief on who I am. So, my name is Deep Mody. I am a doctoral researcher at the Ashwin Business School. I have done my master's in positive organization development from TS Western, and organizational group psychology is pretty close to my heart. That's something what I have been doing since quite some time. Strategic performance management is definitely a core integral part of strategic human resource management, which eventually helps entire organization develop a lot. So that's something what I would try and cover on, and I would try and speak about in this session. So what I would do is I would try and set certain expectations right in terms of the process and the flow and how these next 45 minutes would move on in terms of contracting, in terms of psychometric contract that we can have. So what I would do is here's a quick brief about some pointers when we are leveraging upon digital pedagogy. I mean, I'm sure we all are pretty comfortable using Zoom as a medium or other video conferencing options as mediums for meetings and trainings and webinars and seminars. We all are used to it since quite some time. However, this is just quickly summarizing on certain good to do things. So, well, I would love to have your video on, although I'm sure some of us may have bandwidth issues, but then it's always good to have video on because we're trying to speak with people, and it certainly helps interacting, looking at people, and trying to talk more about things. I would also love to have some conversations. I would certainly encourage on collaborative learning rather than me being a single person giving out a long monologue. I mean, I might have just recorded a video and put it on YouTube, but that's not what the idea is. The idea is to have a lot more collaborative learning. In fact, all the participants that we have here, each one of us has lived through organization culture and PMS systems in some or other manner. So it is about trying to understand what we have already learned and trying to put together the entire bunch to see how exactly it looks, what are the best practices, and how can we leverage upon our learning and understanding. Well, I would also have you no muting mandatorily. So I'm sure we all are pretty mature and we know when to go on mute and when to stay on mute. So be mindful about it. Just feel free to talk whenever you wish to during the session. Just unmute and talk about things or ask any questions, and I would love to respond. Of course, we have whiteboards, we have chat as an option. We all know all these features. So you can either write on the chat or you can just speak on the call, and it'll be good. It'll be good to go. So there's also a number on the screen in case you need any technical assistance in the meanwhile, just in case you get conked off or you're not able to log in or you can't go on mute or whatever may be the case, just call up on the number and you'll have an immediate help available right away during the session. So trying to have this premises set, I would begin with describing a little about collaborative learning. So what exactly do I mean by it, and how I offer as a platform to approach in terms of attending this session, contributing to it, and learning towards it. So, here's an interesting story that comes to my mind, which I heard from my grandmother in my childhood days. It was a story about six blind people trying to figure out an elephant. So now I'm sure some of us might have already heard this, but then the idea was there was a group of six people, six blind people who wanted to see how does an elephant look, and the only way they look at things is by the feel, the way they touch. So that's what they try to do. They try to touch an elephant, and then they try to figure out how does an elephant look. Somebody touched the leg, somebody touched the tail, somebody touched the stomach, somebody touched the ear, and whichever part they touched, they thought that is how the entire elephant looked. Well, none of them was wrong. Somebody thought it was like a rope. Somebody thought it was like a tree. Somebody thought it was like a huge fan that we had in ancient times before the electric fan. So they all had their own perception about how does an elephant look, and none of them was wrong. Just that nobody was completely correct. So when I'm referring to a topic as simple as performance management or strategically aligning performance management to business goals, it's not a new topic. It's not rocket science. It's something that we all have experienced in some or other way throughout our careers, throughout our professional lives. Just that whatever we understand is a part of it. So it'll be great if I have some inputs, some collaboration, and we all come together sharing our opinion about what we understand from performance management system and what we think how it should be processed in an optimal manner so that we can collate all of that. I can share certain academic understanding which I carry from my experience and in my learning. And let's see how does the entire bouquet look like. That's something what I really invite everyone to try and learn through during this session that we all are here for. So what I would do is, warming up a little, I would directly jump in to the topic here. So when I'm referring to strategic performance management, here's the agenda that is in my mind. We would quickly try and discuss what is strategic performance management. We would try and understand what is the impact of organization structure and organization processes on different frameworks that can be used for it. We would also try and explore what is the distinction between performance management system and performance enhancement system. It's a huge philosophical difference. We would try and see how does it relate to. We would also try and understand how does it mean by driving performance by rewards. We have rewards and recognitions. We have a lot of R&R programs. How does it help and to what extent are its limitations? These are few four broad areas that I would try and capture on. If you have any other specific area in your mind, do talk to me, do write on the chat so that we can try and discuss and let's see how we can try and incorporate it in the duration that we have with us. So keeping that in mind, moving on to the first topic, what is performance management? So here's something that I have. I have 2 pointers here. Now it'll be great at this point to try and hear from people. Uh, is your understanding of performance management, or what do you understand when you see these 2 pointers written on the screen? I would love to invite so that this also gives me a brief understanding of where we stand right now and how do we build upon it. If you're already at an advanced level of discussion, we can build upon it further rather than going too low into basics. So here's where I invite everyone to try and share what is your understanding of performance management system. Please do share it either on chat or you can share it. Either you can simply talk about it. Please do share it. What is your idea and understanding of performance management? Hmm. Well, so this is going to be one of those sessions where it's just me talking, not many people talking about it. All right, then that is the way it is. So building on this, I have 2 pointers here. Well, okay, I have someone, I have Ali writing clarity of roles and responsibilities. That is interesting. It is good. I have Santosh saying setting objectives in line with organization requirements. That is also correct. We understand that. What else? Do we have any other opinion? Both of these opinions are correct. Do we have any more opinions to add to it? Well, I have Atul saying measuring the progress. Yes, it also helps us measure the progress. How do we do it? How do we do all of these together? How do we put all of this together in a common structure? Something that I'm trying to understand. And let's try and figure. So, here's an interesting aspect. The moment we speak about a performance evaluation system, we all understand its basics of JDs, KRAs, KPIs. We have a goal sheet. A typical bell curve is what we all are pretty comfortable with and we're used to it. We also have Elias writing defining goals of organization level cascaded from top to bottom. Yes, that's a hierarchical structure that we are referring to. So we all understand these basics. But broadly, when we try and understand the entire process of performance management, it depends upon the data that we capture and how do we process the data. So even if we have a fantastic balanced scorecard done by ENY or call it any consulting agency or probably your internal experts, your internal consultants or internal HR experts, PMS experts that you may have in your organization, You may have a fantastic goal sheet defined, but the crucial part is how do we measure it? So let's take an example. If you're referring to human resource department, and let's refer to recruitment as one of the functions. So recruitment as a role can be expected to fulfill open positions. So the beginning point can be MRF, manpower requisition form, which is duly signed and approved, and the recruitment person gets the requirement. And the day the required person joins in, that is after the interviews, after the negotiations, after the salary, and after all of that, after the notice period, when the person joins in, exactly that's when the requirement of the MRF is fulfilled. So probably that turnaround time can be one of the parameters as one of the result areas of a recruitment person. And how do we define that turnaround time? How do we quantify it in terms of number of days? That can be put as a KPI of that person for that specific role. Now we can have zillion such roles. We can have zillion such different parameters defining KRAs and KPIs. But the crucial point is how do we measure it? So it has to always be backed up with a strong PIS system or MIS system, as we generally call it as management information system or performance information system, where the entire data is captured. Now, it is one thing to define an excellence goal sheet. It is one thing to try and have it as objective as possible in terms of the targets and the areas of improvement. It may not necessarily be very subjective. That's something what we try to avoid. That's something what we always try and focus on, that there are not too many subjective loopholes left out on the manager to try and decide on his or her whims and fantasies. That's something what we try and avoid. But even if we have those parameters defined as objective, how do we really quantify them? How do we measure them? So I would say whenever you start on with an exercise, whenever you build on with a performance management system implementation in any organization, always begin with the MIS system, always begin with the PIS system. Always try and understand what are the day-to-day rules. Of course, that's how the job description is built on, and it's further split on KRAs. We'll speak a little more about it in the slides ahead. Yes, I have someone also writing identify success factors KRAs. So of course, I'll come to the chat comments as well. Uh, it is important to define how would those be captured. An MIS sheet, what will be the frequency? Would it be daily? Would it be weekly? Would it be monthly? So the recruiter example which I gave, if the KPI or the performance indicator is, let's say, on an average of 30 or 40 days is when the recruiter is supposed to get those people on board. So MRF is day zero, and the candidate joining in is, let's say, where the whole process ends. The entire turnaround time, the number of days on an average, should not exceed 30 to 40 days, or whatever is the parameter that we decide upon. So if that is the target of the person, how do we capture it? It requires daily entries, it requires weekly entries into the system, into your MIS system, in terms of tracking when was the MRF received and when did the specific person join throughout the entire duration of review. It may be monthly review, it may be quarterly review. How do you carry forward the pending ones and how do you average them out? So all of this is a math which has to be put in just beyond a single parameter. But yes, that is how crucial it is, and that is how we can objectify an entire PMS system. So I would say there is no one shoe fits all, there is no single solution to it, but that is an important aspect of stepping into PIS, performance information system. And that really goes a long way when we try and define any kind of performance evaluation system. It builds upon it. So I'll try to throw a little light on performance evaluation system skeleton. How does one define it? How does one come to it? We all understand there are JDs, there are job descriptions from which we try and define all the KRAs, the key result areas. But let's look at it from scratch. Let's just try and understand how would someone, let's say me or someone like you, would try and approach an organization afresh with a fresh view, and how would you define it from scratch? So any organization typically has two different buckets when we of defining performance. When we're referring to KRAs and KPIs at an individual level, we're referring to two different buckets of information which has to be captured. So let's build it backwards. I would say, think about this. I step into an organization and I need to design PMS of the organization. I'm not referring to any fancy keywords. I'm not referring to balanced scorecard or 360 degree or MBOs or DuPont circle or smart goals. I'm not really referring to any of the frameworks right now. I'm just talking about basic, simple approach. Of course, I'll speak about the frameworks later, a little ahead, but then I'm talking about basic, simple approach. The moment I walk into an organization and I need to define the performance management system, what truly comes to my mind is, of course, strategic alignment with business goals. We all understand that. Any PMS system has to be strategically aligned. So I walk into the organization, I see there is already some appraisal or PMS system going on, which a lot of organizations already do have. It may be on an Excel sheet, it may be a piece of paper, it may be a common form being sent all around. It may have some functional parameters, some subjective parameters, bell curve, whatever it is. There is a system which is already going on. And if I really need to ensure that each departmental goals are aligned to the business goal, I would begin with the business goal. So think about this. I get all the functional heads in a room and the decision makers, the stakeholders, the key department heads in a room for a few hours. And let we take a plain piece of paper and we try and define the entire end-to-end business process. What marks as beginning of the business activity and what marks as the end, where we actually get the money in the account and it is closed and the books are closed. It is about defining the entire business process on a piece of paper. Say, for example, if a very crude example, let's say if I'm referring to a real estate organization, I would say the process would probably begin with a piece of land. And and then the entire legal licensing process begins, verifying the piece of land, understanding who's the ownership, working out the finances, then it steps on to designing a proposed plan, getting the plan approved, making the payment to the owners, then stepping into contractors, finalizing what kind of material is required, projecting the kind of materials and the cost that we need to put in, then finalizing the pricing of the flats or the property or the units that we'll be selling out, setting up the sales process, the accounting process parallel to it, the finance which comes in from the bank, setting up the entire business process flow irrespective of the departments, setting up end-to-end business process flow on a piece of paper. Once we have done that, once we have the entire blueprint, of course, that's a single brainstorming process that we are stepping into with an entire organization collaboratively put together. It doesn't usually take too many long hours, but then it is an important exercise to get a common perspective. Once we have the entire business process flow defined, it is time to split it into departmental functions. Now, how do we define the business process flow? We'll speak about frameworks later on. But once the process flow is defined, it is split into departmental functions. That this is where this department hands over the task to other department. That is something what we may call it as SOPs for a department, standard operating procedures. This amount of work is to be done from point A to point B is to be done by X department, and from point B to C is to be done by Y department. From C to D, it is to be done by a third department. That is when we split the functions department wise. And how soon or how quickly or how much of the work is to be done, that is defined by SLAs. We call it as service level agreements, but then that is the department's target in terms of quantifying it. So if human resource department is supposed to hire people, how quickly, how many people, how soon, within what budgets? These are the numeric figures which come in and they form as the second part of it. So we have the entire business process, the business goal, which then boils down splitting into SOPs and SLAs. And then each of these department functions, any department already has now clarity of the functions they are supposed to carry out. It is split down into specific requirements of job from a specific chair, irrespective of existing people. I have not even stepped into evaluating the current existing people and the skill sets. I'm only making the entire structure on a blank piece of paper, a blueprint. So if human resource department is supposed to do X number of things, what are the different roles that it requires? And what are the roles in terms of the result areas and the targets that they need to achieve? Again, this is where a performance management expert spends a lot of time individually with each department head, with each department function. When their department scope is finalized, how do they split them further in different chairs? Once we have that, that is the time when we step out trying to map it with existing people. Do we really have those people? That is when we step into competency mapping. I am not going stepping into competency mapping right now in this discussion, but then that is when we map the competencies of existing people. Do they really fit the role or not? Do they need additional training or not? But this is a framework which is well defined. So I would ideally put out this framework on my HRIS system even before stepping out to people and evaluating whether they match it or not. Once my entire skeleton, once my structure is already on a piece of paper, that is when I step out, I roll it out, I make people aware of their job roles. I help them understand what is required, in what quantity. That is when we step into training the team managers to understand what is their role, what is expected from their juniors, and how do they evaluate. A lot of training is required even at a managerial level from a soft skill perspective. How do they train their employees in terms of feedback? We have various mechanisms of sandwich feedback or constructive feedback, a lot of these feedbacks. But then how do they approach it is something which is important. And these are subtle soft skill aspects of it, which all forms the part of entire evaluation system. So, here's an interesting thing. A question which I often get asked is what kind of framework is best suited? We have a lot of these frameworks. We have 360 degree, we have balanced scorecard, we have MBOs, a lot of them which I named earlier. And which of this is the best one to use? Which of this really is impactful? We might have read a lot of news and a lot of HR magazines and blogs and everywhere that various companies are doing away with bell curve, stepping into some other form of performance evaluation system. Well, it's good. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. But does it really work? See, the important distinction is me and you sitting here can try and learn all different frameworks which are available out there, all the gyan which is available out there, all the academic gyan which is available out there. But which one do we use depends upon the organization and the culture, which tool fits in there. So I'll give an example. Now let's try and think if you're referring to a traditional setup manufacturing organization in India. And if I walk into that organization, it's a 500 people organization. If I walk into that organization, and if I simply try to implement, let's say, 360-degree feedback, how comfortable would be those floor workers giving feedback on their managers and on their plant head? And how helpful will it really be for the plant head to learn from them, gain from the feedback, and improve upon? Will it really work in that system? Will the informal system and the processes and the hierarchy that we have in the organization, does it really support this kind of 360-degree feedback, making it really impactful? It may not immediately. Probably the organization has to evolve as a culture and policy altogether to adapt and make the best use of 360 degree. Probably they may just end up doing a simple 90-degree up top to down feedback approach. That's something what they have been doing all the time. Is a transition needed? Or should the transition be at the flip of a second? How do we implement it? Is the organization ready for the framework? And we refer to something as simple as balanced scorecard. Is the organization ready to shift from probably a simple sales driven process, sales driven focus, to a more balanced focus for a holistic organization? It is often said that it is a good thing to do, but it is not just about those 10 people sitting in the meeting room being convinced about it. It is about having all the processes, all the policies, the entire organization culture aligned to it. If I'm driving an organization where sales has been everything for years and years and years, the processes for salespeople are defined around that structure. The policies, the entire flow of the organization is processed across being a sales oriented organization. If I suddenly flip it to a balanced scorecard evaluation, for an example, where my customers are my focus, where people are my focus, where it's not just the money, it's also the process which is important. I look at it from a more holistic perspective. The adaptation becomes a challenge. It is not just about being technical, about using the best framework available. It is also being mindful of change management. When we're dealing with people, Dale Carnegie said that we're not dealing with creatures of logic, we're dealing with creatures of emotions. And change management, change adaptation curve is one of the models that always works, that always helps, and is something that we need to be truly mindful about when we're trying to figure out which framework is an ideal one to fit in and which framework is an ideal one to step into when we try and reach out to employees or an organization, trying to restructure the entire performance management system, the way we look at it. But an interesting thing is, considering the scope of this webinar, it's going to be pretty much superficial in terms of the philosophy and approach towards strategic performance management. I may not have too much of time and energy or the bandwidth to step into specific details of a lot of frameworks, but I hope that you would have some detailed clarity about different areas and sections in which you can truly step into when we are referring to approaching PMS systems. So here's an interesting distinction. The moment we try and define any performance management system, what is the distinction between performance management system and performance enhancement system? So again, approaching this topic from a little philosophical standpoint, I'm sure we all understand. We have seen traffic cops at signals trying to catch people who jump the signal. Now, I have always observed there are two kind of traffic cops. One of them, that there's a specific category of cops who stand after the signal, hiding behind a tree. So as soon as somebody jumps the signal, they catch them and they find them, and they make it. They try the performance and compliance by the fear in terms of, if I get caught, I'll have to pay fine. Let me be very careful. So next time a person is at the signal, the person doesn't care about the red light. The person cares whether is there a cop hiding behind a tree behind after the signal. That's something that what the person is mindful of. And there's another category of cops who stand before the signal, who stand at the zebra line and who ensure that nobody crosses the line. There is absolutely no scope for someone to take advantage of it, jump the signal, commit a crime in that sense, and get penalized for it. There is no damage control needed. They're pretty proactive. Eventually, which one of them is more effective is a secondary question. Which one of them ensures that we have more number of people performing and adhering to the discipline of following the signal? That's a secondary question. But these are two different approaches. Which approach works for which kind of organization and the culture and the framework is again pretty subjective. It's more of an art. It's not necessarily just science. It's also an art in terms of understanding which mix and match to use. You would probably want to use different frameworks, different approaches for a specific organization, and you may bring in two or three different models and merge together, crafting something which is really suited to the organization. uh, more of homegrown. That's something what you can try and look at, and that's the distinction. It is not necessarily science, it is also an art, and it all matters about the way we look at it, the way we approach it. This is a place where I would really try to take a pause and just quickly check in. What is your opinion? How do you think about, what do you think about this? Does this really make sense or it doesn't? Just a quick check in. Well, I have few chats here. I think I from previous ones, I have someone process improving performance by individual team goals which are aligned in strategic goals. Yes, link with profit loss account, identify success factors, KRAs, using OKR method, rest, waste, quarterly. I understand these are all different approaches. Anything specific that you would really want to try and touch upon? So at this point, let me also try and elaborate. Yes, I have someone. Yeah, I have Elias writing. Yes, it agreed. It depends upon your organization to organization, business, and models. Yes, I agree. So if me and you are trying to aim being an expert in performance management system, we can definitely gain a lot of knowledge about few different frameworks which are available. We need not necessarily study all the frameworks in the world. I mean, just the top of the mind few frameworks are good enough to try and have the knowledge and the academic expertise. But when it comes to implementing it, that's where we need wisdom. We may just keep using 3 or 4 frameworks that we have learned. We may keep mixing and merging it, and we can probably just try and keep approaching it in terms of installing any new performance system in any organization. It is pretty obvious in terms of what do you use where. The moment you approach an organization, you get those senses. So this is something what really brings me to the next topic. How do we define a performance system based purely on rewards and punishment? This is a typical understanding that we could either have a rewards and recognition plan, or we can have performance improvement plan. We can have either promotions or demotions. That's typically how any organization is run. We can give either monetary benefit or take away monetary benefit, or we either give a lot of recognition and praise and fame, or we take that away by either demoting someone or making someone look bad. It's always either cat or stick. But when you look at human motivation, there is a lot more at work. Most of the work that I have done with organizations in my limited exposure, there's an interesting thing which I have really found. Any organization, whenever they try and drive any new change, they don't necessarily focus only on the formal authority. The moment I speak about formal authority or formal leadership, it comprises only and only about reward and punishment. However, major part of any organization works upon informal authority. It works upon influencing people. It works upon charisma. It works upon how do people think about you? How do they follow your ideas and thought processes? That is how informal leadership is followed. When we try and fit similar examples and similar human motivation areas into policy making, we have to understand that any performance management system is way beyond simple reward and punishment. You'll understand gamification as one of the ways of trying some short-term goals. But again, gamification also to a great extent is focused upon rewarding, competing, proving yourself better than the other. I'll give you an example. I would step a little into human motivation theory in this topic. Think about this. A lot of you or few of you may really want to do bungee jumping at some point in time in your life. When you really get high on a hill or something and you jump off with a rope, I'm sure we all know what it is. Why would you want to do that? Have you ever done it before? Is there a huge reward for it? Or someone's really put a gun on your head saying that if you don't do it, you're going to lose XYZ things. We don't need that, but we still want to do it. What makes us do that? There is definitely a lot more to human motivation than simple carrot or stick. This Three Idiots dialogue saying 99% marks laoge to ghadi varna chadi. That's just the way we know when we try and drive organizations. I'll tell you a quick story that happened with one of my ex-bosses. A few years ago, this guy was in sales, and one of those evenings, he was done with his sales call early. He was standing at a bus stop in Worli, and I think he's talking about those times when we did not have ceiling. It was even before that. He was waiting at the bus stop at Worli ceiling for the bus. It was about 4 in the evening, and he had nothing else to do. So he just was trying to go home early. So there was a Mercedes showroom behind him, and he was looking at the cars. Obviously, nice fancy cars. Looking at them from glass walls, he loved them. And the sales guy inside, probably he also had nothing else to do, so he stepped out and he said, "Why don't you come in and look at the cars?" And this guy was like, "Okay, why not? Let me just look at the car." So he stepped in and he started looking at the cars. The sales guy nicely explained all the features. He said, this car does this car does that, so and so are the features, XYZ, blah blah blah. He nicely tried to explain. And after a while, he offered a drive. This guy, my ex-boss said, "I'm not going to drive it. I mean, I'm nowhere going to buy it. I just had nothing else to do, so I stepped into the show to look at the cars." They said, "No, please go on, have a test drive. It's me offering. What's wrong with it?" Because I said, "All right, why not? Let me take a test drive." So he got in the car and he drove towards Haji Ali and that highway, and he took a good 5-10 minute ride where the sales guy was sitting next to him, explaining all the features, all the different buttons that change the seat and control the AC. Probably, I think one feature that he told me was there were two different AC controls. You could have different temperatures for two people sitting on two separate seats, and he was pretty excited about it when he told me about it. So he was done with the entire test drive. He went back, dropped the car, he signed off those forms, and he left that day. Of course, there was no pressure to buy or anything. He really wasn't going to buy it. But then he told me, when he told me the story a few years later, he told me that day I took one decision. No matter when I will be able to afford a luxury car in my life, I will definitely buy only a Mercedes. Even if BMW is cheaper, even if Audi has more features, I will only buy Mercedes. But there's something that made him take that decision. There is a lot more to human motivation than simple reward and punishment. Do we really use all these areas when it comes to our performance management system? Or do we leave all of them aside and simply focus on either carrot or stick? Are we really used to doing just that? So when we define a system, studying those frameworks is just one area. But then going beyond the frameworks and trying to understand what truly drives our organization and the culture, and how we really look at a promising system to make the organization flourish, that's when true art comes in. So this is a quick brief and monologue which I had planned for this session. I would really want to spend the next 10-15 minutes trying to understand if any of you have any queries that I would want to try and address. And just one last thing which I quickly wanted to share. Typically when I do a long-term certification workshop, these are the areas which I try and cover. We try and understand what is performance management beyond simple appraisal review. How do we really focus on performance enhancement? What are the different frameworks? We have hierarchical frameworks, we have process-oriented frameworks. What are these frameworks? How do they actually work? We look at how do we define individual career plan or individual development plan in an organization. How do we set up a system? Let's say if I'm working for an organization with about 10,000 people, how do I ensure that each of those 10,000 people have an IDP? And how is that individual IDP in alignment with the entire organization development plan? How are they both synced? Is something what we would I usually try and capture, and I often try and have a practicum wherein out of the frameworks that we would try and touch upon, you can pick up any framework of your choice and try and define goal sheet of your organization. Pick up any department, pick up any job role, and we'll go through the entire process of practically defining and creating an entire goal sheet. So that really helps us get hands-on experience and not just theory of overall performance management system. So keeping the time frame in mind, I would really want to open up next 5, 10, 15 minutes for any questions, queries that you may have, which I can try and address right now in this session. And I truly hope you found the content relatable to some extent. Please, I'm going to be around. Please ask. I'll just quickly look at the chats as well. There's something. Yes, it makes sense. How do you differentiate between strategic performance management and normal performance management system? Well, to a great extent, these are jargons, but the strategic performance management refers to a lot more mindful approach, a lot more sustainable approach with respect to business goals. So when I'm referring to performance management system, it can also be just enhancing performance of individuals in their individual job roles. It can keep working in isolation. In fact, a lot of organizations in India currently run in that fashion, a lot of SMEs especially. We have the department heads deciding how the team is performing, they give them ratings. And I've seen a lot of organizations where every employee in the organization has scored 4.5 rating. An average rating is of about 4 out of 5 for everybody in the organization. But the organization is not making profits. So yes, they have a performance management system. They have a performance evaluation system by which each function is apparently doing good in its own way with their team, with their people. But are all the functions aligned so the overall business is doing good? I don't think so. So it is a strategically aligning and ensuring that all of them are in alignment. So here's an interesting thing. I did an internship at one of the companies. I think it was in either in Belgium or in US. I did that. So that was a solar company, and we asked one of the employees during our interview sessions that what do you do in this organization? And that employee said, I help power homes with sustainable energy. And we were like, yeah, that's good. But what do you really do in the company? And he said, I help power homes with sustainable energy. And we were like, yeah, we get it. But then what do you do in the organization? He's like, I help power homes with sustainable energy. And we were like, okay, so if you really go back home and you're supposed to tell your mom, what do you do in the office? He's like, I would just go home and say, I help power homes with sustainable energy. And that's what I'm talking about. It is not just about doing your specific job role. It's about alignment. What is the vision of the organization? That person did not just say it. It was just random person on the floor whom we picked and we were just casually talking. And that is the level of insight the person has in terms of alignment and the purpose of the organization. How do we drive it? It is not just a piece of paper with four sheet. It's not just 5 people sitting in a room brainstorming, strategizing. It is about implementing that culture. And that's all put together strategic performance management. That's what I believe, and that's what I look at. I hope I answered the question. If not, please do ask a follow-up question. So I will just try and look at another chat here. Uh, how can we avoid bias in PMS? That's interesting. I would say, how do we define bias? So I would again go a little philosophical, but then I hope I am also able to try and understand. As long as we have a lot of subjective parameters, there may or may not be bias. As I mentioned, informal authority and informal leadership works a lot more on people skills and group dynamics than formal authority. We have objective parameters, we have well-defined PMS systems. Let's say 9 out of the 10 KRAs are all defined from MIS systems. Nobody can do anything. In fact, there's probably not even any appraisal discussion needed. The data is right there, and you just see that this data comes to rating of 3 and 4. I think a couple of BPO organizations to some extent have very high level of objectivity. They have their AHT, they have their call idle time, they have the number of hours logged in, or whatever other parameters. They have most of it quantified. So as soon as it is quantified, the chances of subjectivity reduces. Now, how do we quantify it? So I'll give an example. If I am referring to, let's say, an accounts executive, someone who's, let's say, processing bills and payments, who gets bills from the vendors and whose job is to clear the bills, either give out the check or send them back. How do we quantify their work? Now, what we did was in the PMS, in the MIS system, we defined on the percentage of the bills and the number of bills cleared per day. So if a bill has come to desk of the accountant, accountant's job is to either pass the bill for payment or reject it and ask for more clarifications. But in either of these cases, the bill would not stand on the table. And that is what the MIS captured. And that MIS helped the PMS system, the evaluation system, to be a lot more objective, because of which there was less subjectivity. There was less dependency on the accounts manager saying he does a good job, she does a bad job. We really try to eliminate that kind of bias. It's trying to be as objective as possible and as precise and in control in that sense as possible. So I hope I answered that. If not, please do ask a follow-up question. If I have also not understood the question correct, please do ask. Okay, I have someone saying, has bell curve really become redundant in today's world? I don't think so. I think most of us use it. Again, it's about compatibility. If I am to try and implement some other PMS system, how would my ground base level employees adapt to it? That is a huge question. I may have some fancy terms. I may have, I may probably copy paste the structure that Google uses or probably IBM's come up with. But is my construction organization, or is my manufacturing organization, or is my retail organization, the ground level people, are they in alignment with it? Do they understand the importance of it? Something as simple as 360-degree, what I said. Do the juniors truly understand what is the importance of their feedback and in which direction should they be giving feedback to their superiors? Are the first line managers in that state of mind? Are they culturally ready to adapt it in the right fashion and improve upon it? Do we have the organization ready for any other structure? As long as we all are comfortable with bell curves since last 2, 3, 4, 5 decades, it is very difficult to run the awareness and adaptability. Something as simple as filling in those appraisal forms is such a tedious task. I've heard employees complain a lot of times, do I really go back and do my job, or do I really just keep writing about what have I done? So even capturing those basics are so tedious, and they don't really understand the importance of it. That is the level of awareness that we go down to. If you're really shifting it from bell curve to anything else, making it a lot more process oriented, making it a lot more open, giving the bosses the freedom to try and decide what they want to rate and how they want to give appraisals, it's a good thing. But do we have that level of awareness? Do we have the organization ready so that overall it is not just each department doing well, it is the organization doing well? Are we ready for it? That's something what we need to understand. There can be various different frameworks that we can use. Reiterating the same point, we can have knowledge about different frameworks, but that's why you need to have wisdom about which one to use when. So I don't think bell curve is redundant, and I personally don't think it's going away anytime soon, because that's just what people understand. It's not just about HR people understanding new frameworks, it's about all the employees understanding the new framework. Every employee understands the rating of 1 to 5. It's simple to understand, it's simple to keep in mind. As long as they do not understand it, it's pretty difficult to have it really productive any other way of doing it. That's my opinion about it. Well, yes. Any other questions? Feel free to ask. I am right here, and I would love to answer. Oh, I'm sorry. I think I missed out one. How to develop BSc? How to develop the balanced scorecard? when we speak about defining the business goals, so I would try to go back to one of the slides which I showed earlier to see if I can relate to the topic that I'm referring to right now. I referred to defining the business goals and processes as the first step. So as soon as we try and do that, what is the focus of the organization? What do we consider as an important part that the organization is willing to look at? That is where balanced scorecard comes in. If it is a simple sales driven organization, then the organizational goal is only to focus on bottom line, or probably just the top line and increase the revenues. But the first part of business process flow and goals, if it is a lot more holistic approach, that it is not just the money, they're also focusing on the processes, they're also focusing on the CSAT, not just external, even internal CSAT, they're focusing on people development. If it is a holistic goal, with each of those parameters getting equal weightage, we might as well convert simple balance scorecard into a bell curve method and keep going with it. That is the most practical and the most understood way that we have seen in Indian industry and people following it. So yes, why not? It is about defining those four categories, each of those parameters. So for example, if I'm referring to again the recruiter's role, how does a recruiter's role get defined into all of these four categories in terms of finance, in terms of customer experience, in terms of the processes and in process efficiency rather, and in terms of development, in terms of individual development or team development, or whichever fashion we try and define it. So each job role, each department function, or each organization goal, any of those goals are defined in these four categories in different parameters, and they are quantified in terms of how much do we want to go about it. So what defines the KRA and how much defines the KPI? That is one of the ways of approaching organizational goal through balanced scorecard method. I hope I did answer it in a crisp manner. If not, please do ask a follow-up question. So I think we are pretty much coming towards the close of it. We have 10 more minutes left, and I'm right here for any of the queries or questions that you may have. Feel free to ask. Well, I have Elias writing to COVID-19. Will companies focus on PMS, or they will aside it for a few years? Our economy is down and all the organizations will focus more on revenue as bonuses, rewards is linked to it. My personal opinion, it would still go on. In fact, it would be a lot more stringent in these times. Appraisal and performance management system are two separate things. We're talking about managing the performance, we're talking about enhancing the organizational performance. Does that really get converted into monetary increment only or not? That's a secondary question. So of course, we do have annual appraisals getting linked to the percentage of increment. That's an obvious way of looking at it. But then PMS has to keep going. In fact, this is a time when organizations would rather focus on a lot more lean focus, less number of people, more work done, so that we have that bottom line keep going up. So they may not be able to give 20% hike to everybody. So they may probably have less number of people, but they can at least give 10% hike to those 10 people who are still working. And I think it would be a lot more stringent, a lot more close monitoring, especially when we have a lot of distant working. I'm pretty sure not all the offices are on yet 100%, and we don't see it happening in at least quite a few more months. By the time at least this appraisal would come to an end, it might also change the way we keep doing business going forever. Of course, we all have read a lot of news about a lot of IT companies to begin with. They have decided to keep their employees working from home because that's just a little more efficient, and they're able to do it in that fashion. So I would say it's the entire structure that would change. The feedback mechanism, the way we approach it, it would definitely change, but it would be a lot more stringent now, possibly because of the trust factor. That's one of the informal things that act on people. As long as the person is sitting in front of me and working, I trust that the person is working. As long as the person is not in front of me, I don't know what is the person doing. So I would have a lot more stringent parameters, and that's just the way human mind works. But it is very real, and it impacts a performance management system. So that's what I look at it as. Well, I have somebody else writing, which is the best PMS system. I would say the best PMS system is like finding the right bride and groom. Best match is what matters. I may have the fanciest of jargons. I may have the best of quantitative figures, and I may have the best of MISs. But if I'm trying to implement that in a retail environment where the ground level staff may not be able to even understand 5 lines of English, it's not a right match. So I would say the best PMS system is the best match. What do we look at it? That's my understanding about it. What are the areas we should focus on while preparing IDP of an individual? Typically, it is three areas that I usually recommend. One is the functional skill. Second is the soft skill in terms of interpersonal skills with people. And third is the
हाँ
leadership skill. So,
मैं
typically
अभी
what
चांद को
happens
ले
is,
आती
uh, yes, Subrat, I believe you're trying to say something
सॉरी
or you just accidentally, yeah, no problem. So, typically, I was referring to IDP, Individual Development Plan. So typically what happens is when we look at people getting promoted, let's say a sales guy becomes a sales manager, or probably an HR lady becomes an HR manager. So whenever we have people escalating in their career, these are typically strong individual performers who are put out in a team management role. But the skill sets required are completely different. If a salesperson could bring in 10 sales a month, that person has their own way of doing things. But the moment they're put in charge of ensuring that all those 5 people bring 10 sales a month, their selling skill set would not work. What they really need to learn is people management skill set. And that is a training which is often not given. So the moment we speak about having an IDP, one is the technical or the functional skill set. Second is interpersonal skill, something as simple as, charm and disarm. I mean, is it really helpful to get your work done by firing people, or do we just build coalition? Do we really help them with something in an informal fashion and get things done, or do we always keep just using a formal authority? That's interpersonal skill. The third area is leadership skill. How do we ensure that people below us, in terms of hierarchy, people below us, how do they perform? How do we help them reach their target? So any IDP typically has to have three goals. These three areas of improvement is what we can look at. Okay, I have another question here. How would you measure employees working from home if he or she not dealing with any project? I would say in the current times, I've seen a lot of shift from number of hours worked till the work delivered. So if I'm referring to, let's say, recruitment again, since I've been talking about that example, I would not know whether the actual recruiter is putting in 6 hours a day or 12 hours a day, unless I really have that person on video screen monitoring at all times, which is impractical. Nobody does that. So I would not know. I would rather focus a lot more on the performance or the output that I expect from the role on daily basis, weekly basis, monthly basis. So, for example, if it's an IT person, if there are certain number of tests to be done, or a certain level of coding to be finished, or certain level of flow to be tested, how do we quantify the task to be done, irrespective of the number of hours put in? I think the entire premises of PMS system would change in from the number of billable hours to the output done, because that is the best way of monitoring it. There's no other way we can try and monitor it. That's one opinion in terms of what I've seen in last 3 4 months, whatever clients that I've been working with and how they have transformed their way of looking at things. It is all on these lines. They're concerned with the daily MISs, the daily output. Doesn't matter how many number of hours the person puts in. So that's a shift which I see happening, and probably a much needed shift. Going a little academic on this, I think we are going through fourth industrial revolution, something that was projected to happen a few years later, but it's happening. We can also see a lot of manufacturing companies where all the employees are working from home and they're still managing it remotely. I've seen a lot of automation, but that's the fourth industrial revolution, and we're quickly stepping into it. So when we had those manufacturing firms, the performance evaluation criteria were different. We had those personal managers, we had those time cards, and the way wages were negotiated and everything. It still happens to some extent, but then to great extent, it is obsolete. We have different ways of working, and now we are just stepping into the fourth industrial revolution. And definitely, the norms of PMS system would change. All the frameworks that we have may or may not be the same that we would keep using 5 years down the line. Those frame of performance management were probably designed about 2 3 4 decades ago, where the times were different, where people were right there, where you could monitor, where you could examine how things are moving up. But then times are different. So yes, it's an era where we all are evolving. Me and you can probably try and experiment something new in our organization and find it helpful. So others would try and follow it. Why not? That is what I see happening right now. So trying to I hope I answered the question. If not, please do ask a follow-up question. So I have another question. Yes. How does rationalization of manpower impact organizational performance? I would say it's the way you look at it. Uh, do you look at human resources as a machine? So, or you look at them as a stock tip. So, I'll explain this analogy. If I'm referring to a machine, I know that the machine is going to give a fixed amount of output. No matter what I do, no matter how fancy oiling I put in, no matter how amazing new electrical cords I come and give it, the machine's output is fixed. So then my entire focus shifts upon reducing the input, reducing the cost, because my output is fixed. But on the other hand, if I'm looking at an excellent stock market tip, if I know that this stock is going to be doubled tomorrow morning when the markets open, I would not mind putting in money. I would rather borrow all the money I can and I would put in the stock because I know it's going to go up. So if we consider our employees as machines who have a fixed output, the entire focus shifts on reducing the wages, negotiating, reducing the policies or the rewards or the free time, reducing all of the inputs because we know that the output is fixed. But if we look at our employees from a creative, innovative standpoint, that no matter what we put in, employees have the capacity and the environment and the culture and the processes fueling their innovation and their creativity so that they double the input which is given. I would rather put in a lot of money. I would probably create a fancy office like Google in every other office because I know the more I give them, the more I get back. But if I come in from a mechanistic belief, I know that I need to give the least as possible because my output is fixed. So I would say when I'm referring to rationalization of manpower impact, it depends upon the way you look at the manpower. If you look at the manpower as machines, then yes, of course, rationalization comes in terms of lean, making it less so that the output is fixed. Trying to find that fixed curve. There's typically a curve which is pulled out, the number of people and the output, and where does it cross. So it's a typical diagnostic way of approaching it, and that's when you find the common point. It's used in Six Sigma and many other process efficiency improvement methods. It is always used in terms of a graphical representation. We can do that, or we can keep it pretty free flowing. So it is again, which is the best match of looking at it. And if I have not answered it to your satisfaction, please do ask a follow-up question. I would love to answer. So yes, we are almost at the end of the hour, which was scheduled, but I do not mind continuing a little more if you have more queries or anything that you may want to ask. And well, I would also have somebody trying to put out on the chat a link to the course and the details if you want to find the more details about the certification workshop. It is usually discussed a lot more in length, and that's just an option that we have. So please feel free to ask anything anymore that you may want to, and I'm right here for a few more minutes. And I would also want to take a few seconds to thank everyone to join in, and I truly hope you found it relatable. Again, at a pretty superficial level, but I hope you found it good. Thank you for joining in. Thank you, Yogesh. Thank you, Ajit. Thank you for joining in. Thank you, Kajal. I hope you found it relatable. Please do ask any. You can also try and reach out to us later if you want to. You have the contact points in the email addresses, emails that you would have received. Do reach out for any more queries that you may have. I would love to answer. That's what I keep doing. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to be online for a few more minutes. Feel free to ask something. I'm right here. Thank you.